And now, more Utalk now.
Hey guys, now before I bring on our special guest, he's a good friend, great guy, you're going to love him. I just want to set the stage a little bit right now for the situation that we want to discuss on the show. Millions of young adults struggle with mental health issues every year. So many of them, and it gets so bad that it affects their daily life. It just messes it up. And you know what's sad? Treatment is available, help is available, and so many of them don't want that help. Now, a lot of people try to stay healthy physically, okay? I'm trying to, but I got to try a lot harder. Some people try to stay healthy spiritually, and fewer people, not anywhere near enough, try to stay healthy mentally. And that's what we want to talk on the show about today. How do we get mentally healthy? How can we get healthier in the mental dimension of our lives? The conversation we're going to have is critical. To me, it's very, very important. Our guest, our friend, is a mental health advocate. Okay, this guy is an award-winning educator. He is the wholeness director at UCLA's Geffen Academy. He is an author. He has done stuff with Utalk before, and he's also the author of a book called Behind Happy Faces. A great read. Check it out, okay? Let's welcome Ross Szabo.
What's up?
Hey, man, it's great to see you, dude.
Good to see you too. How's it going?
Hey, it's going well. It's great to be able to have this time to converse with you. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule. Let's jump into it. What does a wellness director do? I plead my ignorance. I have some ideas, but I want you to answer.
I mean, I get that question a lot.
Okay.
I don't know that it's something I necessarily created a life path for. I kind of fell into it. But what the wellness program at Geffen Academy at UCLA does is we teach students about their mental health once a week. Every single week of their education from grades 6 through grades 12. And so we mainly focus on mental health, but obviously it would be impossible to talk about mental health without talking about healthy sexuality and healthy relationships. Mm-hmm. And so it isn't just mental health once a week. We do mix in other really big topics.
Okay, so you're really talking about whole person wellness, really, then. But it seems like the mental dimension of it is just absolutely critical, and it's one that I think we ignore too much. I mean, why is mental health important?
Well, I mean, it's so important because it kind of dictates everything in your life. I think the reason we don't focus on it as much as we could is because we can't see it. You can see a broken leg. Yeah. You can see a problem with your body, but because the mind is so complicated, we tend to dismiss it or treat it differently. So really what we try to do is normalize that your brain is a part of your body, that mental health does affect you, and break down all of the ways to help young people engage in those kind of skills so that as they go to college or whatever they do after high school, they're more prepared.
Now, that is, to me, it sounds very unusual. Now, I don't remember going through middle school, junior high school, and having this kind of conversation. Is Geffen Academy unusual in this, or has this become more normal to use that word, or are you hoping it becomes normal?
Well, I think now a lot of schools have wellness programs, and what they tend to do is teach students in 1 year of their middle school or high school life. So in 9th grade, you could get all the lessons you need, or in 10th grade or 12th grade. What we've really tried to do is understand that adolescent development needs this kind of reinforcement and education every year. It can't just be stuffed into a health class in 9th grade or jammed into something you learn right before you go to college. That conversation has to be ongoing and persistent in order for it to stick. Like, a lot of schools talk about safe sex before kids are having sex, and then when they're having sex, they don't talk about it again. So, it's really important to maintain that conversation.
No, that makes a lot of sense to me because it's an ongoing, I mean, life is about learning. If we stop learning, we really stop living, and I'm a big one in wanting to learn. I remember the first, I'm a drummer. I don't know if you knew that or not, but that's one of the hats I wear. And I remember the first guy I took private lessons from. I was up in the San Francisco Bay Area. That's where I was raised. And he was like the number one drummer, first call for commercials, soundtracks, everything. And I distinctly remember him one day saying, I was a junior in high school, and he said, Steve, I want you to learn something from every drummer you hear. And I went, Bill, you got to be joking me, man. Some of these guys can't beat their way out of a wet paper bag. And he goes, hey, Russo, your attitude stinks. He said, maybe it's one riff they play. Maybe it's the way they tune a drum. He said, always learn. And, I've broadened it to my entire life because there's so much we can learn. But you go to something like mental health, I think it seems to make more sense that you spread it out. And it seems to me, I don't know if research has been done, but if a student is from 6th to 12th grade, they're getting this in a steady diet over those years, it seems like they're going to come to the end of high school a lot more healthy mentally than cramming it into, and I'm not being critical of the education system, but just cramming it into 1 year, it just doesn't seem like that makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the reality is like a lot of schools don't have time, so they do the best they can.
Yeah.
This summer we're going to be hosting a training for teachers at Geffen Academy where they can learn how to do what we do. I think there's a couple really big things that we have learned, and one of them is most kids spend elementary school getting told that it's okay to talk about your feelings and it's okay to express yourself. But when they get to middle school, it doesn't matter what gender or sexual orientation a kid is. They see that sharing their emotions has consequences. If you're a young person and you share emotions and people start gossiping about you, chances are you're going to stop.
That's right.
If you share emotions and you're made fun of or called weak or stupid or something else, chances are you're going to stop. And so that middle school age is a really critical time to incorporate mental health education because you can counteract the consequences that people are getting about gossip and being isolated and everything else. And then what we see in high school is that's when their identity really starts to develop even deeper. So what is their sexual orientation? What is their race? What is their gender? What is their experience? And how do we use mental health education to help them grow into successful teenagers? And I think that's what's missing, to be honest with you, is that when schools are doing this just in 1 year, they're either not doing mental health education in a way that counteracts the judgment and the consequences for sharing emotions, and then they're not continuing it into high school when that identity development is so critical.
And then do we not see the consequences into adult life where we've got so many adults, they don't know who they are. They don't know why they're here. They don't know, what they're all about. They don't know how to effectively, I guess I'll use that word, share their feelings, share what they're experiencing. And of course, it seems like there's a whole side of that of what is appropriate to share when and with whom. Have you guys found at Geffen that your students are coming out, graduating, I should say, from high school stronger mentally and more prepared to handle the challenges?
So I have a lot of thoughts on this. One is that adulthood is often just undoing what you did in adolescence, right? Most of adulthood is spent being like, oh yeah, that relationship completely destroyed trust and now I'm trying to trust people again. Or like that person cheated on me and now I'm trying to be better in a marriage or relationship, right?
Yeah.
What we've seen, and we have our first graduating class this year, is that across the board, there is much less stigma around mental health. So when we did qualitative data studies with them as they were leaving, across the board, they said they came into school with a ton of stigma. They left with none or not as much. Now, part of the reason for that is we know from an evidence-based data perspective, the number one way to lessen stigma is to have contact with a person who has a mental health disorder. So for 4 years, every week of their 4 years, I talked about my experiences with bipolar disorder and trying to kill myself and substance abuse and all of these other things. And it does normalize it for them where they're in a classroom hearing from a trusted adult that it is okay to go through these things. And the messaging for them was never, hey, you have to figure out your mental health. It was always, you're young, you have this chance to mess up, to fail, to learn from those mistakes.
Sure.
Because adults don't have their mental health figured out.
No.
And I think another way that people fail is they go into high schools and they tell kids they have to have it figured out, but like, that's not realistic. It's not realistic.
No, it really isn't. And to add to this whole complex situation, now we've got COVID. And, you know, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I was talking to my next door neighbor who's a foot surgeon, and I'd never seen him. He's jovial. We laugh and, you know, we build fences together, you know, and do what neighbors do, you know. And he just kind of took this moment and said, my kids are really struggling with this COVID thing. They're really struggling with the Zoom classes. And as a wellness director, as a mental health advocate, I mean, would you concur that this has taken its toll on students?
Yeah, and much like anything else, there's percentages, right? So there was a percentage of students who were prone to anxiety and depression before this, and then during it, we just kind of lost them. And it wasn't a huge percentage, but it was a big enough percentage where it's alarming. And then there was a percentage of students who actually enjoyed being at home and not going to school, which is like a different issue, right?
Sure.
And then, you know, there was a percentage of students who weren't fazed by it, who were online, who were in person. And the unfortunate reality of schools is we're not equipped to handle or help every single one of those percentages. We tend to be like, well, look at all these kids doing okay, so everything must be fine. And you know, that percentage of students with severe mental health disorders really struggled during this. The percentage of kids who, you know, were just isolated or lonely or scared, like that does also affect their brain development too. And so it was a really challenging time for everybody.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because this past semester, typically in a non-COVID environment, no pandemic, I would be going into middle schools and high schools doing a school assembly, using my drums, talking about choices, having a lot of fun. Well, obviously, I haven't been able to do that, but all of a sudden I got inundated with schools contacting me saying, hey, could you do a Zoom class for our drum students, our percussion students? And it was so fun. And the response hearing back from band directors, oh, you inspired our kids. Oh, you gave them something else to focus on and challenge them, you know. And I thought, man, I would do that every day of the week if I could, if it meant that I could encourage students and inspire them and give them some little break, something in the midst of this. So I'm thankful for what you guys are doing. I think it's awesome. And I'm glad that other teachers are coming in. Because, you know, obviously we can't teach everything. I mean, it's like I hear people saying, well, you're not teaching enough history about this or enough. Well, you can't teach everything. But something like mental health is so critical. It's just, I guess I see so many adults struggling with it. And in my mind, I'm saying maybe if they had the regular teaching and the adult they can trust, and like you, and being able to say, hey, this is what I struggled with, and I'm continuing to work, you know, through the journey of life, but it's okay to get help. It's okay. Why do seemingly so few students go seek help?
Well, the biggest reasons that I always hear are it's embarrassing, it's shameful, it's something that they think they can get through on their own, it's a sign of weakness. I think the most number one answer recently, though, is they don't want to burden other people. They have their problems, they have their issues, they see their friends have problems, have issues, and they're like, I don't want to put this on them. And so, you know, what's really happening inside of that is trust. And then also that self-awareness that maybe you're not burdening other people. Yeah. And maybe you're just kind of afraid to actually face what you're dealing with. But those are the biggest barriers. And a lot of people think step A in mental health is like getting a diagnosis or treatment, but step A really is being willing to accept treatment. Like when I was going through my worst period with my mental health, I had access to treatment. I had a diagnosis. But because I felt stupid, embarrassed, ashamed, weak, scared, all these other things, I wasn't compliant with the treatment. So step A really is like asking that question. Hey, why aren't we talking about this? And then breaking down the barriers to help people feel more comfortable.
Interesting. So that means somehow in order to do that though, you've got to have somebody in your life you trust.
Yeah.
Whether it's a teacher, a coach, music teacher, a family member, a friend, whoever. And, I keep thinking about something else I see so missing in our culture, and that's people really listening to other people. When I get done doing a school assembly, sometimes I've got 200 students standing in line wanting to talk to me. And sometimes they'll say the most crazy things, but it's to see. I mean, I had one little girl come up to me, 16. She goes, "Why do you hate teenage girls that have babies so much?" I'm going, whoa, time out. I'm trying to go through my mind. What did I say? No, I would never say that. She was just trying to get my attention. And, by the time we finished our conversation, it was a totally different thing. But that was how she was trying to express herself. And we hear a lot. And of course, I get tired of people when I'm trying to talk to them, taking phone calls all the time, or they're on their phone texting or whatever. It's like, hey, wait a minute. I'm talking to you. I want you to listen to me. Mm-hmm. Take us on a journey, because I think it's important. I remember when we had you on our live stream that, you just put it out there, and I appreciated that so much. And as I was thinking about this month and guests, I thought, man, we've got to have Ross come on, because that's power. It's a powerful story. And what you're doing is so amazing, because it's being authentic and real and saying, look, guys, take us on that journey, if you don't mind.
You mean the journey of my personal story?
Yeah.
So, I think the most important thing to understand is that the mental health journey kind of starts before you're even born, right? So
Okay.
On both sides of my family, we have bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety disorders, and addiction.
Oh. So
my parents, when they got together, when they had us, they were like, hey, we're going to try and do everything different from the way we were raised.
Sure.
And they did. They raised us 1,000,000% different than they were raised, but we couldn't escape that biological tie. And so, my first introduction to mental health was visiting my oldest brother in a psychiatric ward when I was 11 years old.
Whoa.
He was 18 and was a sophomore at the University of Pennsylvania. But my introduction to mental health was really, really quick, I would say. I had to grow up really fast. And then
I can't imagine that. Let me ask you something before you go any further. Was that shocking? It had to be uncomfortable, or had you been seeing things anyway and knew there was some problem? I can't imagine being 11 and seeing my 18-year-old brother in this,
He was exceptional. He graduated high school when he was 16 and went to the University of Pennsylvania to major in physics. And he got through his freshman year without any issues. So it was really hard and just kind of strange. That's what I'll say. Mm-hmm. It was strange.
Okay.
But, I think at the same time, my parents explained to me that he wasn't going to die and that this was something he could live with. And so there was an innocence at 11 that was like, okay, he's not going to die. So what does this mean?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, 2 months after I visited him in the psychiatric ward, my grandmother died. And then 10 months later, my best friend was killed. And then 2 months after that, my grandfather died.
Whoa.
And so, from the late ages of 11 to 12, I just went through a lot of loss and trauma.
Man, that's huge.
And, nobody sits you down and explains how to deal with that. So, I started hiding my emotions when I was 11 to try and make sure everyone else was okay and make sure everyone else was happy. I started drinking when I was 12 because it felt good. It felt like I could numb out, right? Mm-hmm. And so by the time I was 16 and was actually diagnosed with bipolar disorder, what I often share is the most dangerous things that happened before that diagnosis were, one, I'd been hiding my emotions now for 4 years, 5 years.
Yeah.
But two, I learned to drink alcohol before I learned to talk about my feelings.
Ooh.
And so as I went through high school and went into a deep state of depression, I continued to use those coping mechanisms. I continued to hide. I continued to drink. Mm-hmm. And, those coping mechanisms lasted for me really up until age 22. I was hospitalized for trying to kill myself in high school. I went to college for 2 months and had to leave. And then I bounced in and out of different colleges and psychiatric wards for really 4 years until I was able to find a way to start managing it.
What a journey. I mean, with that kind of a journey, that young, I mean, I'm amazed you and I are sitting here having this conversation and you're doing what you're doing, but what a great way to turn things around and, in a sense, say to a high school student, middle school student, okay, you're struggling. That's okay. But now let's talk about coping. Talk to us about coping, because I think that's so huge.
Well, what we know is the second largest period of brain growth in a human's life is between the ages of 12 and 25.
Okay.
And that the coping mechanisms, the identity work, the experiences with loss, change, and rejection that you go through between the ages of 12 and 25 can last for a really long time. You start creating neural pathways for the coping mechanisms that you have at that time.
Sure.
And the longer you use a coping mechanism, the harder it is to change it. So what the work we really try to do with young people is helping them understand that there are effective and ineffective coping mechanisms. I try to get them to understand, hey, what coping mechanism helps you release emotions and what coping mechanisms reinforce your emotions, and just giving them a vocabulary and definitions around coping, because if you can get them to use their self-awareness to start making changes in their lives, then they're less likely to repeat the most damaging patterns of those coping mechanisms.
Sure.
And, you know, what I always say to students is each time they kind of go through a developmental milestone, it's an enhancer. So if they were harming themselves or drinking or doing drugs in middle school, going to high school typically means they're going to do it more.
Right.
And if they're doing it in high school and they go to college, it typically means they're going to do it more.
Right.
And then the transition from college to adulthood typically means you're going to do it more, not less. So anything we can do to intervene is beneficial. And really what we're trying to do with this training this summer is every single school in this country has someone who cares about their students, has someone who has their trust, who has their belief, but may not know how to do all of this. And so what we're trying to do with the training is like give them those skills and those tools so that we can do this anywhere around the world where there is a caring adult.
Wow. I keep saying huge, but it really is huge, because going back to something you said, it sounds to me like part of the key in helping them to develop coping skills is ownership. Instead of saying, hey, do this, do this, do this, it sounds like you have them work it through. So they're owning that process. They're owning that skill. They're owning that fact that, okay, maybe this coping mechanism isn't the most positive thing for me to do, but here's something I can do in place, because I've done the, don't do drugs, the drunk drive, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, and it's all really good. But I have always tried to come back and say, instead of saying, okay, don't do drugs, don't do this, don't do that. Okay, well, they're doing it for a reason. So what can I give them? In a short amount of time, not like what you guys are doing, what can I give them to say, okay, maybe I could do this instead of this. It's healthier. So I love what you guys are doing, and bringing teachers in. And you're absolutely right. I think sometimes teachers get a bad rap, but I've seen, teachers in schools all over the country and overseas that, man, they love students. They're passionate about it. That's why they're there. They've dedicated their life to it. And for you guys to be able to equip more teachers to take this, because it seems like our mental health in this country with adults as well as students is just tanking. It's just, I
think what's happening is we've been locked in mental health awareness for about 20 years now. And the unfortunate downside of mental health awareness is we're going out and we're letting people know all of the statistics of how many people are struggling, but we're not teaching them what they can do about it. It's essentially like going out and being like, hey, everybody, you're all messed up. And then when they're like, I don't want to be messed up, we're like, no, the whole purpose of my campaign was just to tell you you're messed up. I don't have anything for you. And we didn't do that with physical health. We would never go out and tell everyone, here are all the ways you can die. And then when they're like, I don't want to die, just be like, oh, well, I was just here to tell you you're going to die. Maybe you could talk to a doctor. So we really need to move past just mental health awareness. Awareness is always going to be important, What we need to do next is teach them actual skills to manage this.
Absolutely.
Because this approach isn't working for anyone of any age.
It really isn't. And I mean, let's face it, most people know there's a problem. They don't know how to get out of the problem. They don't know how to put a stop, put the brakes on and say, okay, now wait a minute, let me get perspective. Now, okay, here's the steps that I need to take. Here's some of the skills. So props to you guys for doing that, because it's more than, I just think of relatives even that are so struggling with mental health issues and people I come across in different situations. And it's like you shake your head because there's got to be a better way, and not that there's necessarily a normal for everybody, because everybody's normal is different, but we've got to stop saying, here, hey, there's a problem. Did you know there's a problem? Yeah, everybody knows there's a problem for the most part. I mean, if you're either, in a cave or a coma if you don't know there's a problem, so, but give me tools, so let's go back. That first step then in getting help is admitting it. That's what you said. Hey, I need to get some kind of help.
No, the first step is really working past the barriers that are preventing you from getting it. So if you feel like seeking help is a sign of weakness, how do you work past that? If you're embarrassed or ashamed or scared, or if you're worried about burdening other people, how do you work past those barriers? Okay. Because we're not in a time period where people don't know that mental health issues are real or they're things we should talk about or shouldn't talk about, but we have to break down those barriers that make people feel so scared.
Now, once you start that process, now let's jump ahead just for the sake of time in coping. And again, you're the expert in this, not me, but does exercise play a role as part of a coping skill?
Yeah, mental health is health, right? And so health requires a physical health component and whatever people need to do to actually help balance their life. I think what's most important is you don't have to have a physical health disorder to need help to balance your physical health. We are fine with people who are thin and strong and not having diseases going to the gym.
Yes.
We need to get to the same place with mental health where you don't have to have a mental health disorder to take care of your mental health. And how you take care of your mental health could be listening to music, talking to a friend, playing a video game, going for a walk, doing something physical, doing something you enjoy, connecting with people in some other way. But the key there is understanding that anything you do becomes a habit, becomes something you do on a regular basis to take care of your mental health, not just something you do when you're in crisis or when something's wrong.
Oh, that's huge right there. I mean, that really is. Give that to us again, because I want to make sure everybody has picked up, because I think that's super important.
Yeah, mental health is not something you do just when something's wrong. It's not something you try just when you have a problem. Your mental health has to be something that you wire and you foster and you grow, much like your physical health. And obviously your physical health and mental health are so tied together, it would be impossible to separate them.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes so much sense. Okay, what does that junior high, middle school, high school student do to find somebody that can help them unpack the barriers to them turning things around and becoming more healthy mentally?
So one of the things they can do is open up to somebody that they trust. If they feel embarrassed, ashamed, weak, scared, whatever it is, having the conversation about why they feel that way. Maybe somebody did shut them down. Maybe they don't know what it feels like to express emotion. Maybe they don't know what those first steps are. And so just taking that first step to open up about why they're scared or about what they're afraid of is really beneficial as the first step. There are many steps after that. But that first step is really just having that first conversation and opening up.
That is so important. And a lot of students I talk to tell me they have trouble finding somebody they can trust, which I think adults do too sometimes. People can be so brutal. And with social media, I mean, you can just slam, bam, and destroy somebody anonymously, and you can't take that back. It's out there. And I look at the students who have taken their own life because somebody posted something about them. Let me stop for a second with that. Speak to that person. I know we don't have time to get into it in depth. We're going to have you back on the show. I mean, this is really great stuff, and this is what we're trying to do with Utalk. Is Utalk's all about you, students talking to us, and of course, this is such a huge issue. So I appreciate you taking the time. But
maybe something. What could you say? What would you say to somebody who's they're watching the show, they're listening, and they're having those thoughts, and the storm clouds are there in their life. It's dark. They feel like there's no way out. I don't know. There's a first step when that happens
There is. And look, I mean, it's important to say that there is no magic wand that can take away suicidal thoughts. But to anyone who is in that place, there's a couple of things to hear. One, you're not alone. You're not alone in thinking about taking your own life. You're not alone in thinking about what the world would be like without you gone. But two, most people who attempt to take their own lives don't actually want to die. They just don't know how to stop living the way they're living. When I tried to kill myself, it wasn't because I wanted to die. It was because I really couldn't handle the thoughts of death and suicide and the constant anxiety, depression cycle that was burying me. So it's one, important to know you're not alone. It's two, important to know that if you are in a position where you're having these thoughts and you truly don't want to die, there is help available. Yes. There are hotlines you can call. There are text lines you can text. There are resources all over the world that can help you. It's often said that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Yes.
Because it is. You know, it is. You feel stuck. You feel like there's no other way. You feel like there's no way out because you haven't seen that side. But that side is there. It exists.
It really is.
And there's a way to get through it, but it does require that person, you know, seeking help, talking to someone about it, and understanding that, like, you don't go from point A to point B in life. You kind of go from here to like here and then back. Like, you have to celebrate the small wins, the small victories, the small changes in life, because a lot of times when young people are going through things, they want to get from here to here quickly, and our brains just don't work that way.
No, absolutely. And again, it sounds to me like it would be important to have somebody in your life that's helping you to acknowledge, to recognize that small victory and be able to celebrate it. And, you know, I was just sitting here thinking, I've lost track of how many students have told me after an assembly, Steve, I really didn't want to die. I just wanted the pain to stop. That anxiety, that, you know, all of those things. So that's huge. We'll put some things in the notes for this show, some resources. Talking about resources, because our time is quickly going away. And as I say, we're going to have you back if you're willing to come back and join us, because this is really rich stuff. This is gold for our students and young adults. Where is a good place for mental health resources? Is there? I mean, I know there's multiple websites. I think one of the best websites is Psych Hub, because it is the collaboration of every single mental health organization, every single topic, every single thing you could imagine ever needing is at psychhub.com. And it's truly one of the most collaborative efforts I've ever seen. If you want to do advocacy, it lets you know all the advocacy available. If you want to learn about a disorder, it gives you all of the resources for that disorder. If you need help, it connects you to help in any part of the country you're in. It's really just the one-stop shop for everything mental health. We'll put that up at psychhub.com. Okay. See, I was not aware of that. So that'll be a good resource for us to be aware of, to tell, you know, people in our audience, hey, here's a place you can go. We'll also list hotlines and text numbers where you can be even more anonymous. They don't hear your voice. But I think that, to me, it's like, if you're hurting, get help. There's help out there. There's people that love you and care about you. And you may not be able to find a Ross in your life, but find somebody close, you know, that will walk through this journey with you. Ross, thank you. It's great to see you. Thank you for sacrificing your time. I know you're busy, and we'll work on getting you back and talk about some of the other issues, because it sounds like we just barely scratched the surface.
Mental health has it's a complicated, layered topic, but thank you so much for having me on. It's always good to see you too.
By the way, if somebody wants to follow you on social, how do they do that?
The easiest way is through Instagram, just my name, Ross Szabo. On Twitter, I'm at Rossi Szabo, because the only other Ross Szabo on the internet got there before me. And then my company is Human Power Project, and we sell curriculum to people of all ages, kind of middle school through corporate. So that's the best way to find me.
Awesome. And you do have the book Behind Happy Faces.
Yeah, I have a book called Behind Happy Faces and another book, a kid's book about anxiety, which was on Oprah's list of her favorite things for 2020, which wasn't bad for sales.
No, I was going to say congrats on that. I mean, to get the Oprah stamp, I've never had that with my book, so I'm going to have to work on that. Just to stay even with you, bro.
There's still time. You have time.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Hey, thanks, man. It's great to see you, and we'll be in touch. Thank you for taking time.
This is Utalk Radio.